Welcome, everyone, to Gary Has Issues and Kenny Has Too Much Free Time. I'm Gary Kroger, and I'm coming to you from Waterloo, Iowa. And as always, I'm with my co-host, Ken Seisler, in Los Angeles. Ken, how are you?
I'm well, I believe.
That was an editorialized well, Ken.
No. But I hadn't given it much thought on how I was until you just asked.
Didn't you assume that would be the first thing I'd ask is how are you?
Sure, kind of threw me, though. Okay.
It threw you. All right. Well, the rest of this will go much, much easier. Because, all right, that was a difficult question. How are you? Well, we have a special guest. I know that's a cliche to say. Our guest today is a very special guest, but they all are special. But this gentleman...
Well, wait a second. It can't all be special.
Well, we wouldn't have them on if they weren't special. No. Why would we have someone...
I just don't know how you're special if everybody's special.
What's wrong with super special?
Okay.
Oh, well, there he is.
All
right. We have a very super special guest today. Now, this guy's been a friend of mine for 38 years. Since our days from the early to mid 80s on Saturday Night Live. Tim Kazurinsky is well known for a number of roles back in the SNL days. My favorite was Dr. Jack and perhaps the Iguana. It was probably my favorite character of his. But, you know, it was Tim's career that followed as a screenwriter. He was part of the Police Academy Ensemble, the trilogy of Police Academy, as well as his television work. We both did Curb Your Enthusiasm. He's been on stage. Well, you know what? And he's doing stuff right now that we're going to talk about. Please welcome.
I can't wait to meet him.
My very special friend, Tim Kazurinsky.
Oh, that's Tim Kazurinsky.
Hi, Ken. How are you?
Tim.
Hey,
I am
Gary.
very well. Now, we're speaking to you in Chicago, right?
I am in actually Evanston, Illinois, about a couple of blocks south of Northwestern, where Gary Kroger hooked up with those people that Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Brad Hall and Paul Barras and those crazy kids. So yeah, I'm right in the hood.
Tim, we're gonna mention that in a little bit because it is kind of interesting how that SNL connection came. But you have a very interesting history. Now, I knew this already. I didn't even have to go to Wikipedia. But you were born in Pennsylvania, but you were raised in Australia. You came back to the United States to finish school all by yourself at the age of 16. Yeah. You became a copywriter for a giant advertising agency, Leo Burnett, and that led you to Second City to become more confident as a pitchman. And fill some of that in, Tim.
Yeah, yeah, that's a whole lot of stuff before interesting shit happened. All right, World War II, my mother thought it would be a good idea to get knocked up by a coal miner from Pennsylvania.
Who doesn't?
She went with him to America after the war and had 5 babies. I was the last one. At the same time, this was in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, a little mining town southwest of Pittsburgh. There was another woman in hospital having a baby to my old man, and that was her second. So when my mother found out, she took her 5 babies on a grant from the Australian government and back to Australia. So I was 2 months old at the time.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt here because I think I heard you say that there was another woman in the hospital having your father's baby at the same time.
Yeah. It happens all the time. So.
Well, maybe in Pennsylvania.
I noticed that too, but I thought, well, I must have misheard, so I just let it go.
No.
I can't imagine that. Talk about a scene in a movie.
By herself, she took 5 infants, because we were all a year apart, back to Australia. And yeah, this is a movie in her life, because she kind of got sick in the Suez Canal, and somebody took care of her 5 kids until they got to Australia.
So you didn't lose all relationships with your father?
Oh, yeah, no, he came back about 3 years later. He was a coal miner bookie in Pennsylvania, and he got into trouble with the mob, and he went back to Australia with a lot of money and got her out of a Salvation Army home, and she took him back. They married, divorced, married again, divorced again, and then she was secretly living with him when...
Tim, I'm going to ask this question because you're a screenwriter.
Yeah.
We'll go into that later. Why would you, and people say a screenwriter should always write what they know. Mm-hmm. Did it ever occur to you to write this story?
And we're still waiting for a few family members to die.
Of course, aren't we all?
Well, now, Tim, was there a plan here, or were you just sort of going with the wind? I mean, you were a copywriter. Did you think that you would end up on television or be a comedy writer?
No.
Fill that in, the Second City part of this story.
Yeah. Well, to get out of Australia, I had both my parents were drunks, and I got an ulcer at age 14. And so
I'm sorry to laugh, but it's just unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, and a doctor said to me about the ulcer, he said, your dad's crazy. Your parents said, you got to get out of that house to get rid of the ulcer. So
And you're 16.
I was 15. I was 14 when I got the ulcer. And at 15, I quit school to got a job and save up. And I went to America, lived with my 2 Polish aunts in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Came to Chicago in '68. It was the Democratic National Convention. I fell in love with this town.
Wow.
And I just was crazy about it. And I never left. It's been home to me. Yeah.
But you didn't come back with a cool Australian accent.
And I worked so hard to get rid of that accent because the Brits, they so despised, even the Pythons hated the Australian accent. They used to make fun of it all the time. I had to get rid of it because I was actually shy, and everybody would ask me to speak, Australian.
Can you quickly go back into that accent?
Yeah.
No, I can't now. I worked so hard at losing it. It's actually difficult to do because I was trying to get rid of that cursed accent.
So you took classes at Second City in order to bolster your confidence in front of people? Is that right?
Yeah. I was a reporter at the Johnstown Tribune-Democrat for a year at age 17, came to Chicago, ended up, in the ad business for Leo Burnett and McCann Erickson. And I took a class at Second City to better present my commercials. And Second City offered me a job.
But did you have any ambition to go into the entertainment field as a young boy?
No training.
But
no.
you took, if I may, to improvisation like a shrimp to a Barbie. Right? But you did. You took to it very well. So now suddenly you find yourself performing on the main stage, or the touring company to the main stage?
It was one of those things in life that kind of happens where, and with my crew, with Bruce Jarko, Nancy Kelly, Mary Gross, George Wendt. George Wendt was selling insurance for his dad's insurance agency. Mary Gross was a secretary of the American Dental Association. Bruce Jarko, city planner. I had come from advertising. We didn't have headshots. We didn't have voice tapes. We had nothing. We had shit. But we got on that stage. We were making a couple of $100 a week to do 8 shows and improvise 6 times a week. And we were making nothing. It was dirt money. Still, the greatest couple of years of my life, because you were tapping into a creativity that, like, I can do. Look at this thing. It's kind of magic. We were making magic every night, and it was a complete rush. It's a drug to tap into something like this whole creativity.
But you're not thrown right on stage, right? Do you have to go through some kind of classes to learn the process?
Oh, I was in class with Del Close. I took some classes with Del Close, and I think with class with Josephine. But I didn't have any acting lessons. In fact, Del Close, who would, he was a great teacher, a madman, absolute crazy.
I knew Del.
But nobody taught you like he taught you. It's like the doors of perception slammed open when Del taught you. It was remarkable. He said, go ahead. You got to go take a scene study class. Because you need some. So I took a scene study class at Kingston Mines Theater from this guy named Mamet, David Mamet.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And you had to have some experience. And after the class, the Mamet pulled me aside and he says, "You asshole! You haven't any fucking training. What are you doing? Get out!" He said, "I would kick you out." He said, "But you're the only guy, straight guy in the class. I gotta keep you around." So we ended up, kind of becoming friends. And he'd asked me to do this piece with him called Litko. And weirdly, years later, I wind up writing the screenplay
About Last Night,
which was David Mamet's sexual perversity in Chicago. And he never shit on us publicly because I think it made a lot of money at the time. It was a big hit. So
well, now, Tim, so what you give me a year here, because I was going to Second City as some snot-nosed kid from Northwestern. What are the year parameters here?
That was 1977. I left the ad business to join Second City with George and George's Volkswagen. We drove out to Elgin every day and did a show out at the Chateau Louise. And then I got main stage about 6 months after that. Now,
Shelley Long joined the cast then soon after, right?
She was on stage with Miriam Flynn and Will Porter. That was that cast. And George and I and Mary Gross were 78, 79.
You are what gave me, there's the story here where we're going to connect, because you and Shelley and all of you and Mary gave me the bug to start thinking about, hey, maybe some of us, could do improvisational comedy at Northwestern and kind of in and around the seams, which eventually we did, because eventually me and Brad Hall and Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Paul Barras and Rush Pearson created the Practical Theater, and we were just sort of Second City. They'll kill me for saying Second City light, but we were sort of hanging around the fringes of Second City.
Was your ambition to get into Second City, Gary?
I never thought in a million years I'd get into Second City. We, in fact, opened a space next to Second City that's called the ETC space. Our theater was called the Practical Theater Company, so it was called the PTC space. But Bernie Solins would say, I'll make some money off these kids. We'll take the spillover audience and he'll sell drinks to them. And we became a relatively big hit. Tim, do you remember those days?
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I got Dick Ebersol after my first stint there to come, and Tischler to come back to Chicago and see you guys and Rush. So I had no idea he would hire the lot of you. That was amazing.
Well, let's get back to how you ended up there at SNL, Tim.
How I ended up there? That's just fucking ridiculous.
Okay.
I did not audition. I'm the only human being who never auditioned for Second City or Saturday Night Live. I had when I finished SNL, Second City, I had written a pilot for a show called Big City Comedy, which was a Canadian-American production, and we shot it in Orem, Utah, at the Donnie and Marie studio, and that got picked up. So I went up and I worked for a season with John Candy, the most lovable, wonderful human being. What a movable feast of a guy. And it was a blessed time. And we had, our guests were Fred Willard, Billy Crystal, Rita Moreno. Oh, it was so much fun.
Insane.
So I come back to Chicago, and this guy Ebersol comes in and he wants to take me for a drink at the pump room, and I'm telling him, he's taken over for Gene Domanian, and I'm like, I'm getting high, gin and tonics. I was like blasted, and I'm going, that Eddie Murphy, kid, get that guy from the Domanian thing, and Piscopo, and you got to have Mary Gross, and I'm like, fucking, who am I? I'm telling him what, and then he says to me, well, I want you to do the show. And I'm like, what? What the fuck? And I'm like, I just got a job as a writer at SNL. And I'm like, holy Christ. And one drink later, he says, wait,
you got a job as a writer from SNL? He offered you a job as a writer?
Yeah. And so about 10 minutes later, he says, are you AFTRA? I said, why wouldn't I need to be AFTRA? And he said, well, everybody in the cast has to be AFTRA. And I said, did you just say cast? He said, yeah. I said, why do you think I hired you? And he says, I said, as a writer. And he says, you write?
But Tim, I had always heard that it was John Belushi that actually got Ebersol to take a look at you in the first place.
I didn't know that. Why would he hire me out of the blue? I then found out later that he had come on John Belushi's recommendation to see me perform. And that was the craziest thing, that he had seen me perform before I left. And that was the weirdest thing of all, is that I didn't find out later that it was John who had recommended me to Ebersol. I think Ebersol said, John thought you would be a good den mother for the group.
Well, now, how did John know you? I know you did Neighbors, the movie with John and Dan Aykroyd.
Yeah.
How did John really know you? Just from hanging out at the stage?
John came into town doing the Blues Brothers. And that was when I met John. And he took, I have no idea why, but he took a shine to me. Later in life, I once heard that Marlon Brando was friends with Wally Cox. That's the only thing I can do. And so
you're Wally Cox in this case, though, right?
Yeah, I'm the Wally Cox, of course. And John kind of wanted to hang out, and the Blues Bar was right across the street. And so he'd come, and I got him to come on stage one time, and I can't even describe the audience reaction. The minute he walked out onto that stage, and it's about 350 people.
And no one knew. No one knew he was coming.
No one knew. It was as if somebody put jumper cables on the audience. About 350 people in unison all just went, "Wah!" They stood up and screamed. It was a frightening, visceral thing. He got that kind of reaction from an audience. But he would, I would say, John, I was writing on a little movie called My Bodyguard at the time, doing a rewrite. And I said, well, John, I'm going to be at work at like 8 in the morning. And then I got to do the show at night. And he said that I can't come out tonight. And John would just get me in the headline and said, let's go. And we would go to the ale house or the blues bar or whatever. And, but we kind of became friends at that point. So, and then he came back in town and did, Continental Divide, whatever. But we were pals, and I loved him. He and Judy were just the loveliest people. So, and that recent documentary that she just did is just, that's the guy. She's captured him. The Wired did not capture the John Belushi I knew, but this documentary Judy did is really beautiful.
So let's take this time period here, because now it's in March of '82. John died.
Yeah,
and I was doing practical theater then, next door to Second City with Brad and Julia and Paul. And in the late summer, early fall, my agent, Harris Davidson, called and said, hey, Saturday Night Live is looking. Why don't you just do something? So I went into her office and I did Ed Sullivan, right now here in our shoe, and the Beatles, she's a drag, a well-known drag, everything that I could possibly, I did the tree from The Wizard of Oz. I'd like to somebody picked your apples. Just weird stream of consciousness stuff, right? Meaningless. And it was sent out there. Never heard another thing. Then I heard Tim Kazurinsky was in the audience one night, never said anything. And then a week later, Dick Ebersol and Bob Tischler want to talk to us in the hotel. And so in September of 1982, we are whisked off in 2 weeks to New York City. I get there, and you are the warmest, you're the den mother of Saturday Night Live. And you were the warmest, most inviting person, but you were the only element that made us feel safe at all.
Yeah, well, it's kind of, it's kind of a snake pit. And it's that whole publish or perish or get that schedule to do that show is just a freight train. And people get very desperate, and they live in fear of their, losing their job and their mortgage payment. And it can be dicey. It's a very...
But you were the person that Dick Ebersol and anybody would go to, hey, Tim, the show's 10 minutes short, and you'd come up with a Dr. Jack, or you'd come up with something. You were the glue of that show.
Well, the first year where, when Michael O'Donoghue, did you work with Michael?
No, but
right.
Michael was still on the walls in spray paint.
Yeah. That year before, Michael O'Donoghue called everybody into the office when we were starting out, and he said that the show was a Viking death ship. It needed to die. We're going to set it on fire. Then he took out in his office at 30 Rock, took out a can of spray paint to paint danger, the word danger, on the wall.
That was still there.
And he sprayed DANG, and he ran out of paint. So it was just dang. But that was a frightening year.
Tim, do you think that comedy has changed? Because I watch the show now and I actually like it, but I look at our period as a little bit comic-y. It was a little cartoony. Characters were a little broader, which was more like the original cast. Those characters were quite broad. Do you think you could do, for example, having a good time wishing you were here, which was the greatest pun for an enlightened Indian mystic. Do you think you could do having a good time wishing you were here today?
Well, all the shit that Azaria got for doing Apu.
Right.
I never encountered that with my guru and my Indian accent. In fact, a lot of East Indians came up and were very complimentary because it was flattering. I was kind of the hero, the smart guy, the wise guy, the funny guy. There was no antipathy. I would sign autographs for people. There was no malice to the thing that I was doing. I think that was the difference.
I have a question about the producers, Lorne Michaels, Gene Demajian, if I got to pronounce it right, and Dick Ebersol. And did the different cultures they might have contributed. I'm not sure everybody knows that there was a time where Lorne Michaels, who was brought the show together, it's original show. Then he left for, I'm not sure what reasons, but maybe to move on. And then they went through a period of Gene and Dick Ebersol. And I'm curious whether or not there was a shift culturally at SNL where things turned kind of different, that they had to bring back Lorne, and that Lorne has been there now for 30 years. So I don't know. Do you think the producers had a real impact, or just not really? It just could have been anybody?
In retrospect, I used to fight with Ebersol, as Gary will attest to. I battled with Dick Ebersol over lots and lots of stuff. And in retrospect, what I now see with the hindsight is 20/20. When Lorne left the show after 5 years, because his cast was leaving, whatever, I think that he left because he wanted a bigger piece of the pie, a bigger cut, whatever, and figured that they wouldn't survive without him. Zemanian came in, shot herself in the foot. Then they hired Dick.
And how did she shoot it? What was the incident that that shot herself in the foot? What did she do so dramatic?
Charlie Rocket said the F-bomb. There was just it just wasn't working, and it was it wasn't working. People were like, "Whoa!" And they weren't. Anyway, Ebersol came in, and he was he was NBC's exec. He took over, and Lorne Michaels was going to be working on the new show. The word was out that if you did Saturday Night Live, you wouldn't get on the new show. So we had trouble getting guest hosts. I think we had Marvin Kalb one time and Ed Koch, and then had trouble getting music groups and stuff.
So Lorne was intentionally undercutting SNL, do you think?
I suspect as much.
Well, he certainly doesn't give us a lot of love today.
Yeah. No, he never ran any of our episodes. Why? Because he couldn't make a nickel on those. So he would run all the old stuff. I thought our reruns would put my kids through school, but that didn't quite happen.
No.
But anyway, Lorne introduced the new show, and it didn't fly. And then it opened it up for other people to come in, and then we could finally get, more named hosts and more named music groups. And so I don't think, in retrospect, even though I did clash with Dick Ebersol, he kept that show alive for 5 years and kept it on the air. And so, and here I am, coming to his defense, and I mean, he kept the ball afloat for Lorne to come back in year 10 and just take it over again. So
I think I'm quoting you again, Tim. You called him the George Steinbrenner of comedy. He hired who he needed to keep it afloat, but to his credit, he did. Now we worked together for 2 years.
Advertisers like crazy, by the way. It was he did manage to keep it afloat. So,
but my sense was that Lorne Michaels' comedic sensibilities would determine what the content was that got on the air.
Yeah.
Was that true of Dick Ebersol as well?
No. Yes.
Yes. Okay. I mean, I never thought of
Dick
Dick
from sports and
a
network executive.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. he came from sports. I don't know where Lorne came from, but it does come down to the sensibilities of the producer and the associate producer. So
Dick has to laugh in order for the sketch to go forward.
Do you think so? I don't ever remember Dick making those. He trusted Tischler.
He did trust
Andy, and he trusted you.
Yeah. Well, I had done this little film called Hitchhiker, and
really?
Ebersol was like, he didn't like it. He didn't air it. And then one time one week I had written like 4 or 5 pieces that kind of saved that week's show. And he came and said, thanks, you really bailed us out this week. I said, I don't know how to thank you. I said, run the Hitchhiker film. And so the next week, to his credit, he ran this little Hitchhiker film. The audience response was absolutely massive. They laughed through the entire commercial break. And Ebersol just looked over at me and just said, I'm sorry, but I didn't get it.
Well, Tim, I keep going back to this. To me, again, you were the glue. You were the den mother of the show. You were the person that we all went to when we had a bad week. We'd close your door and cry in your office. I know I took advantage.
What was he wearing that he was the den mother?
He wore a little. But Tim, do you still have that in your office? But Tim, so then after 2 years, though, how did I survive into a third year with Marty Short and Chris Guest and Billy Crystal? And Julia came along as well, and Jim Belushi.
Yeah.
What happened there? Why wasn't Tim Kazurinsky there? I never knew. Nobody ever told me.
Well, I never sort of figured that out either. I had planned on doing one. It's an enormous task doing that show, and I was running out of steam. I thought I'll do one more year and get the condo and I'll be done. So and it didn't work out that way. And they cried Niobe tears when they fired me, but they fired because Eddie was leaving.
Right.
They let go of. They needed
Piscopo.
money. They let go of Piscopo and me and Brad, and who else? They kept you.
Well, Robin, Mary stayed.
Robin, yeah, Mary
Robin
stayed,
Duke,
and you stayed. And
Julia,
and then they brought in
Marty Short, Chris Guest, Billy
which they'd
Crystal,
never done before.
Harry Shearer,
yeah,
Ham Stevenson,
yeah, and they were not the friendliest people at that time. It was a very weird thing when that those guys came around, but all wonderfully talented people. But they had all, Billy Crystal had done soap, Marty had done SCTV, and they'd done Spinal Tap. So this was, Ebersol doing what he had to do to keep the show afloat because Eddie was leaving. He was a very pragmatic guy, I think. So
yeah. The whole time period, with all those names that you mentioned, coming in with Marty Short and Billy Crystal, those were like the catchphrase years, where everybody was like, "You got to come up with a catchphrase."
Right.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel that?
I even wrote a bit for the news where I just couldn't come up with a catchphrase. I mean, because it was so prevalent. Seriously, but now
I don't think they do that anymore on SNL, do they?
But everything goes through periods. I call it the cartoon period. Everything, Gumby was popular. We were very broad, in my view.
Yeah, but also we go back and look at those. There was a lot of funny stuff, and there were times when in subsequent years where it was like some things were like impressionistic, and they was like they weren't going to go for jokes, they weren't going to go for funny, and I do have to say I was really proud to be an alum of SNL when after the Trumpster got in, Kate McKinnon came out and sang Hallelujah, and it was just a brilliant moment.
It was. Tim, I'm quoting you again. You once said, "Never cut funny," and I use that all the time.
Yeah, never
cut funny. Now, so I went on to do the show another year, and we sort of lost touch, because everybody gets very busy. I mean, even Brad Hall and I kind of lost touch. But then a couple years later, About Last Night comes out. It's my friend, Tim Kazurinsky, and your writing partner, Denise, right?
Yeah.
And About Last Night, and it was brilliantly funny. It was a monster hit. And I learned that it was adapted, of course, from Mammoth. Dude, I was blown away.
Yeah.
And now I'm following your screenwriting career because you wrote a Molly Ringwald movie.
For Keeps, yeah.
For Keeps. You wrote a Paul Reiser film, Strange Relations, that went on to be nominated for a BAFTA, right?
Yeah, I got a BAFTA nomination. I didn't win, but Julie Walters, the amazing Julie Walters, won the BAFTA for her performance. She's a genius.
And for those who don't know, BAFTA, the British Academy of Film
and Television Arts.
Whatever, yeah. BAFTA. Yeah. So you were developing, was that also co-written with Denise? Or
no, that was actually, I wrote that in it was at the time, it was Granada and Showtime. It was going to be a feature release, but Granada was going under. They ended up releasing it in the UK as a TV movie, and then it came to the States and ran on Showtime. But now, it's my favorite film.
It should be your favorite film. Now, here's the thing, and Ken was talking about this earlier. I keep hitting my own mic. Ken was talking about using material from your life, because your life story would be a great movie of the week, no question about it. But here you have Paul Reiser as a psychiatrist, this is all from memory, who has leukemia, right?
Yep.
This is pretty dark. And this is from Tim Kazurinsky. Where did this story come from? And how did you find the story with the family to save him? Give us some structure here.
Okay, there's a guy named Jeff Pope, who's a wonderful producer and now a wonderful writer. Jeff, for their factual drama department, had this news item about an American psychiatrist who had found he had leukemia and found out he had been adopted in England, and he went back to find his birth mother, found her. There were no other siblings, which make the best bone marrow donors. The end of stories. And Jeff was like, well, ITV wants to know, Granada said, what if there were other siblings? How would this story have gone? And so I was lucky enough to get to write that. I was supposed to just write the American portion, and they're going to have a Brit writer on the end. And luckily, one night Jeff was on TV, and he saw my name go by on About Last Night. And he said, I'll just watch a couple of minutes. He watched the whole movie. Then he hired me to write the film. And I'm so glad, because it was a fantastic experience. And it was actually a true story. And when I wrote it, I weirdly had Julie Walters in mind and never thought that she'd ever get to do it. And she did it. And the first day she walked on set, I just started sobbing, because in her house dress and stuff, I realized that I'd patterned her after my mother. And it was like, oh, dang, years of psychoanalysis. She was absolutely my mother. And one of the makeup ladies just nudged me, and she says, she's everybody's mom.
Well, Tim,
great performance, great shit.
I'd like to ask a question about...
Go ahead. Yeah.
I find it kind of interesting, and interesting because people are always wondering, well, how do you learn the skills to become an actor or in comedy or a writer? You didn't really have that much training to get you to become a very good sketch performer and improv person. But a particular skill, because I know I've tried it myself and a lot of people, is screenwriting. Yeah. That's a real skill. You really have to know the form. It's very different from writing a narrative. It's very different from writing a teleplay. It's a unique form of writing, a screenplay. Did you just pick it up naturally?
Piecemeal. What happened was I was on stage. I'd been a writer. I'd been a reporter in Pennsylvania. I wrote ads for years. So you're going from 30 seconds, whatever. Tony Bill came into town doing a movie called My Bodyguard, and he liked came to Second City, loved the way the dialogue was on stage, and he wanted some scenes punched up. So Bernie came to me and to Denise DeClue, and we started punching up scenes, and bingo bango. 6 weeks later, we had pretty much rewritten.
That's how you learned.
Right, that's how I learned, and doing it bit by bit by bit. And somebody once said that if you if you sat at a typewriter and typed AG's script for The African Queen through your typewriter, just typed it twice, you would know as much about screenwriting as any university could teach you. And it's learning by doing. And that's pretty much how I learned.
Right.
That's
because it is interesting. I get people will ask me, solicit, to read their screenplay, and you can tell right off the bat if they know the format or if they know the structure. They know Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. It plays a lot into you're taking that screenplay seriously. Yeah,
it's weird. I actually think it's a craft and not an art, unless you're William Goldman. His screenplay for Marathon Man was and Princess Bride. He turned it into an art form, but it is a craft that can be learned, and now screenplays are readily available for everybody to pick up and look at and see how it's done. Yeah, but in the old days, they used to call the camera angles and shots. I mean, it was those old guys, which it was a different form back then.
Yeah, now, they literally cut to medium close up. Right, specifically in the script, and you don't do that anymore.
No, you don't. You just sort of write the scene. And who was it? Somebody gave the advice. I'll remember in a minute. And it was just like, don't say what the people are wearing. You got great costume designers. The lighting. We got great lighting designers. We got set designers. We got just open the scene, put the words in, and believe me, everything else is going to get done.
And
read an Aaron Sorkin script. Aaron Sorkin, and one of the things that I heard, he never describes what the room looks like.
Yeah.
Forget it. Don't describe what the room looks like. Just use one word to say. It's an extravagant room. Done.
Yeah, exactly. Less is more. Like I see so many screenplays. The frigging stage directions go on forever. Shut the fuck up. Get to the word. What are they saying? What are they doing? Just cut to the chase.
Yeah.
And a lot of screenplays also have their inner thoughts and their motivations. Nobody gives a shit. It's what comes out of their mouth. Come on.
That's brilliant. Now, Tim, we could make this an entire episode, but
hopefully we will be able to.
We have limited. Well, I mean, this could be an entire episode.
I think I heard a couple of
screenwriting.
I think I heard a couple of minutes that we could use from this so far, Gary.
This could be an entire podcast only talking about screenwriting.
Okay.
But we have limited time.
Yes.
Tim, you have such a varied career. I want to talk about television. You were in the Police Academy movies. You and I both did Curb Your Enthusiasm. I'm sure you've got a million Larry David stories, and so do I.
Yeah.
Let's touch on some of that. Police Academy, was that a fun experience?
Absolutely. And still in touch with all those people today. Weirdly, when my wife, when I got into my dotage, my wife had done 4 Broadway shows, and she got me to do a musical, Hairspray, out at Drury Lane. My second musical was the first national tour of Wicked.
I know!
The Wizard of Oz. And I did it for 15 months, had the time of my life. I'm in my late 60s, and it was so much fun. I absolutely loved being the wizard.
You can sing too?
No, I can't sing.
No, he can't sing.
It didn't matter. I faked it. I had a wonderful, absolutely wonderful time doing that.
Well, now, when back at SNL for a second, was Larry there that last year with you, or just with the third year with me?
Just with you, yeah.
Larry David was on SNL with you, Gary?
Yeah, Larry David was there.
Yeah. He was a writer. He was a writer on SNL.
He was a writer who never got anything on the air, and he was so angry about it that in the wrap party up at the Rainbow Room after the last show, he came up to me and he said, "I'm going to kill Dick tonight." No, true. He told me, and he had a little vial of clear liquid, and he said, "I'm going to kill Dick." I assumed it was arsenic. Then I see him circling around Dick Ebersol's, gin martini or whatever, around the bar, and I thought, am I going to be an accomplice? Oh, no, this is a joke. Of course it's a joke. And if I say something, I'm going to look like a fool. So I just spent a sleepless night, thinking that maybe I should have said something. Years later, I'm watching Seinfeld, and of course, George slips a Mickey to his boss. I thought, I was part of that. But Larry, we used to keep money for Larry because everybody knew he'd be unemployed. You know, I mean, it was just a really interesting experience. But now I got to do Curb Your Enthusiasm, and I think you did like one or two before me or after or whatever.
Yeah.
What was that experience like for you? For me, it was bliss.
It was absolute bliss. My friend Jeff Garland had invited me in to do it. So, and in my episode, I had been an investor in the restaurant, and I had a pool party and invited everybody. And so Larry and everybody, and Julia, everybody comes to the party, and my son gets out of the pool. He's like 8 years old, and his mom takes his trunks off, and he's hung like a Shetland pony. And so they're remarking on the sides of him. He's like Dillinger. So anyway, at the next meeting afterwards, Larry asked me about my kid's penis, and I'm going, "What? You're so." I'm so incensed that we get into a big fight and we have a big argument. But then again, I meet him one more time with the kid at a screening of Richard Lewis's HBO special, and the kid and Larry David start insulting each other back and forth. And the little boy, the sweetest kid, I think Michael Perez, whatever was his name, he didn't want to say anything mean. And I said, "Okay, I'll come up with the mean things, and you say them, so they won't be mad at you." And then.
So the way that he works is he basically just tells you what the premise of the scene is, and then it's ad-libbed through there, right?
Oh, yeah, there's no script. No script at all. No.
Was that season 4 with you?
3, I think. Yeah.
3, yeah, because I did season 4, and I was the weatherman, and I came in. I didn't even audition. He just talked to me for a few minutes, said, "Can you start tomorrow?" And so he said, "Improvise a weathercast. Just make sure you say it's going to rain on Sunday." Okay. Do another. Make sure you say it's going to rain on Sunday. Okay. Now, tomorrow we're at the golf course, and you're playing golf, and I'm going to confront you and tell you that you're bullshitting the weathercast, so the golf course is empty. Just make it up. 6 cameras are running. You do it, and he makes a couple of suggestions. You do it again, and you move on.
It's brilliant.
It's brilliant.
I want to know how somebody so brilliant never got a sketch on Saturday Night Live. Did
Tim?
you listen when he would pitch a sketch? When he would pitch a sketch at SNL, when you were there, Gary?
Yeah.
Why did it not? Because all his premises sound.
It goes back to what I thought earlier with Dick, and I'm not throwing Dick under the bus, but he's not a funny guy. He didn't understand Larry. Larry's humor is very esoteric. He wrote a sketch about architects arguing over the height of the stool on the elevator in a new building. That was the premise.
Yeah.
And so it just wasn't understood. We got it. Julia adored him, which obviously that relationship went on to work.
Yeah.
But the writers understood that Larry was brilliant, but it just wasn't understood by the producers.
Just didn't get it.
Yeah,
just didn't get it. Now, Tim, go ahead, Tim.
But Tischler was there too. I mean, that clearly they weren't getting his sense of humor. But I don't think they got the practical theater company's sensibilities either. So.
But they got it enough to hire us, but then not let us do what we do.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, so it was weird. But again, that's another podcast. But Tim,
television. Yeah.
Since now, I want to talk about today. Now, you worked with George Wendt a lot. You guys did Odd Couple, didn't you? You played Felix.
Oh yeah. Oh God, we had
Oscar
this time. George and I were in the same cast at Second City in 1978 and 79, and as with Mary Gross and. Audrey Neenan, Bruce Jarko, Kelly. We all remember each other's birthdays. We're all still the best pals. I think the camaraderie at Second City was even stronger than the camaraderie at SNL. That was, and we were making nothing. I remember George and I going into Bernie and demanding to be paid $300 a week, and Bernie was like, "You're killing me. You guys are killing me."
Yeah, but now Cheers for how many years? And he sat in a stool, right? For Cheers, and I'm sure he did pretty well for that, right?
Fabulous, yeah. It was 10-year grub stake. It's like what a great gig, you know.
Boy, I'll tell you.
You sit in a bar and drink a beer.
Does he have great memories of Cheers?
Oh, fabulous! Okay. Yeah, he absolutely adored it.
Tim, you've had such an amazing career, and you've done so many things. I mean that sincerely. Every time you come off of my radar, you reemerge, and you're the screenwriter of this, or you're on stage, or you're with George Wendt, or you're in Wicked. So here you are today, and I keep saying you're a septuagenarian, but you are the most, and you're younger than anybody I know, Tim. What are you doing now?
Boy, that was a long way.
Well, but during COVID and this lockdown, what's paying the bills? Residual checks? Are you working on a new project? Are you getting back on stage?
Honestly, I worked, having grown up in the slums of Sydney without a flush toilet until I was 14. I have been, I think, driven by poverty and insecurity, and I said yes to everything. I wore many hats. I took jobs that I did not know how to do, and then I learned how to do them. I worked I had so much going on. I worked way too much. I'm now 70. It's Miller time. I have the ability, now I'm able to say no to all the shit that I would have done in a wink years ago. I really, all the pensions have kicked in: SAG, AFTRA, Writers Guild, Equity, Social Security. I'm finally, the guy who was driven to not starve to death. I'm realized I got enough money to get me through. So now I have the luxury of living where I want, which is here in Evanston, Illinois, and doing what I want. And it's wonderful to be able to say no for once. But also, I am the luckiest man in showbiz, because I didn't have to audition for Second City or Saturday Night Live. On my honeymoon, I get a call from Blaustein and Sheffield. Blaustein and Sheffield wanted me to do one day on a movie when we got back. And I remember my wife saying, "Oh, why would you read it one day?" That movie was Police Academy 2. The day I shot the scene as the old lamp store owner, they fired the director and brought in a new director, Jerry Paris. He said, "I like the gang leader, which was Bobcat Goldthwait, and the lamp store owner." I said, "Well, it's just a day play." I said, "Keep him around." So keep him around. So I am there for the rest of the movie for another 6 weeks. And Jerry Paris comes in every day and says, "What do you and Bob want to do today?" I'm going, "Okay." Then I do 3 of those movies, and it was the best payday I ever had in my life. And this kid used to say yes to one day of work. And that's the whole theory of yes and of improv. Just say yes.
Yeah, just so. And Tim, you said yes to the right woman. You married well. I was at your wedding. I was at your wedding when you and Marcia turned around. You said your final vow. You must have put on Groucho noses, and then you turned to us in the church, and I realized that you married the right woman.
That was such a great wedding.
Yes, it was.
I'm telling you.
What little I remember.
From her hometown in Michigan came in, and weirdly, that week, there was a special flight rate to Chicago. It was like a $50 United Airline ticket or whatever to fly to Chicago. And there was a great hotel rate. There were like 50 people from SNL at that wedding. It was like everybody came in. It was so touching and wonderful. And the band played till 2 a.m.
Today it would have went viral.
Today it would have.
Let me ask you both a question.
It was so much fun.
Because you're both on SNL. Were on SNL. Do you watch SNL now?
Oh God, yes, yeah. Would not miss it.
I don't watch it at night though. I watch everything that's YouTube the next day. I watch all the highlights. I watch everything that's sort of recommended.
Thoughts? General thoughts?
That's what I do. I quite often, half the time, I tape them. I watch them the next day, but I always do watch them. I think for the first time in history, the women are stronger than the men, and they're tearing it up, and it's great. It's what, 40 some, how many, 44 years now?
It's been 44, years.
40,
yeah, it has to be 45 years.
75, yeah. It's 45 years, yeah. And the death of Saturday Night Live has been prematurely predicted by everybody, and every new gang that comes in takes shit that they're not as good as the last group, and then they find their sea legs, and it manages to and Lorne's done a great job too.
I love the show. I have a recurring dream where I'm asked back, and knowing what I know now, I'm able to do much better than I could do back then. Hey, I know we're losing you, Ken, but I want to ask Timmy another question. Do we lose you
physically?
Yeah, physically. Aren't we losing you?
I'm fading.
Tim,
I have a few more minutes.
Tim, you have you had some weird thing with Coldplay. You were a tour guide?
When I was, weirdly, my tour with Wicked ended with a 16-week sit at the Pantages Theater in Los Angeles. Now, I had so many careers that depended on LA, I never lived there. I would fly in, get the gig, leave, fly in and come home. That was the first time I ever lived in Los Angeles, was in 2015 for 16 weeks. And because it was close to the theater, I got a rental in Hollywood, which is a horrible place.
Yes, horrible.
Like, horrible. Junkies, people living in tents on streets. I came out one day to go up to towards Second City down Hollywood Boulevard. I come out of Wicked, and there's the two Elmos in costume duking it out in a turf war, punching each other in the head, and a black and white police car comes, cuffs one of the Elmos, takes him away. It was a crazy place. However, the best thing was giving backstage tours after the show. Melissa McCarthy wanted a backstage tour with her family. But one night, the cast was abuzz because Chris Martin and Gwyneth Paltrow were there with their kids to see the show. And they were like, we got to meet him. And I'm like, yeah. Blah, blah, blah. And so that intermission, the manager comes back and said, there's this note from Chris Martin of Coldplay asking if Sweet Chuck can give his family a backstage tour after the show. And I'm like, hey, kids, guess who Mr. Coldplay wants to see? The old fart. So,
look, we've got to wrap up because I promised I wouldn't take Tim's life and et cetera, and the light is changing. We've changed from morning to afternoon here in Waterloo. Tim, I mean this sincerely. And
anyway, I do have to tell you that the ridiculous thing was that after the third time that Chris Martin said, I really liked your singing, I was like, okay, thank you, but this is not for real. I've never had a freaking lesson. I'm just belting it, whatever. But thank you.
I think the secret to your success, Tim, is you've never been trained for anything that you've done. You were never trained to act, to go into sketch comedy, to improv, to writing, to singing, and yet you've been a remarkable achievement. And I think that's great advice for young people out there.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times people go, this fucker is winging it, and if he can get away with it, I can get away with it too. So
exactly. You know what? All right, this was a perfect close here, because Tim, I mean this sincerely. You've always been my hero. You've always been this person that doesn't say no. You've been this person to say thank you for whatever you receive, and you just make it work. You're telling your stories of your career confirms that. You make things work because you do them. You say yes. You're positive. You're a font of wisdom, if you will.
A font?
A font. I can't wait to see you, Tim, because in closing, my wife lives in Evanston because that's how I make marriage work now. Well, she does. She took a job in Chicago and she lives in Evanston. So I'm slowly moving my life to Evanston too. When this COVID thing is, well, I went to school there for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
When this is over, Tim, I can't wait to go out with you and Marcia and have you meet my wife and
survive the Trump virus. We will survive the coronavirus, and we will enjoy a beer again, my friend.
I look forward to it. That is a perfect close. And to all of our many fans out there, thank you for watching. Find us on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Gary Has Issues, and Kenny Has Too Much Free Time. I want to thank our very special guest, Tim Kazurinsky, one more time. Watch this show because it is a wealth of information on how to write screenplays and how to be successful in many ways in a very difficult business. And how to make life work for you. Yeah. That's what you offer, Tim.
You're going to join us in Chicago for a beer sometime, too.
Oh, boy, it would be wonderful to meet you, Tim. I had a great time. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks. And folks, never cut funny.
There you go.
So long.
Bye-bye.